Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. There has been a lot of talk recently about the UFC pound for pound official rankings. There's also been a lot of talk about Jon Jones pulling out of his fight with Stipe Miocic at UFC 295. And Jon Jones just so happens to be ranked pound for pound #1 on the UFC official rankings. And I believe that Jon Jones should be stripped of #1 pound for pound, and it should be given to Islam Makhachev. And not only do I believe that Jon Jones should be stripped of that pound for pound #1 spot, he should also be stripped of his UFC heavyweight title. And I haven't said that in recent videos. I've done other videos reacting to the news. I haven't said that yet. But now that I've gathered the full scope of information regarding Jon Jones and the future plans for Jon Jones with the UFC from Dana White, Jon Jones should lose his UFC heavyweight title. He should be stripped of it. He should vacate it, which is the common thing that's gone on over the last couple of years. Fighters vacate their belts, but it's really the UFC telling them, look, either you vacate it or we're going to strip them. But I wanted to make a video breaking this entire subject down because you look at the rankings, and I've said since I've had the channel, about 2 years, I've said the rankings are absolutely meaningless in the UFC. They mean nothing. There's so many ridiculous rankings that you can point out with ease. And I've always hated the UFC rankings because they're just so illegitimate. And I know people are going to say, well, if you hate the rankings, you don't care about the rankings, you think they're meaningless, why are you making a video about them? Because the hypocrisy of the rankings deserve to be called out. There's a lot of people who don't understand. They think the rankings is the end-all, be-all of everything. The UFC rankings are illegitimate. Now, if you don't know who makes the UFC rankings, I'm going to share to you who makes the UFC rankings. How are the rankings determined? Rankings were generated by a voting panel made up of media members. Now, I'm not going to go through the rest of that, but if you look at the bottom in the fine print, the rankings panel is comprised of media members from the following outlets: KHON Honolulu, MMA Odds Breakers, CFMU 93.3, and I'm not going to read every single one of them, but the last one I want to read is Blood and Sweat. These are the people who are making the rankings. You can look at the list and read the entire list. You can pause the video, look at that if you want to look at it. Who are these people? I have no idea who any of these people are. So we have people making the rankings. We literally have no idea who they are. Blood and Sweat? Blood and Sweat is who's making the rankings? I mean, who picked this list? Who's picking this list out? We don't know who any of these people are. They are the people determining the rankings in the UFC, the top 15 of every division, the top 15 of the pound for pound rankings. They are voting on it, and then that's how the list is compiled. This is just ridiculous. I'm going to point out a couple examples of how horrible the rankings are. So right now you have Alexander Rakic sitting at #5, okay? He has not fought since May 14th of 2022. That is crazy. You have Yuri Prohaska, who I kind of nitpicked this one a little bit, but he's currently #1. He hasn't fought since June 12th of 2022. I understand he has a returning fight soon, so that's not as bad. You have Brian Ortega sitting at #3. He has not fought since July 16th of 2022. How is he still? It's been over a year. He's still in the rankings. That's not all. That's not all. You have Colby Covington sitting at #3. He's currently sitting at #3, and he has not fought since March of 2022. And then lastly, you have Stipe Miocic, who is ranked #3 currently. He has not fought since March 27th of 2021. 2021. And you can even throw in Paulo Costa too, who's ranked #6. He hasn't fought since August 20th, 2022. So you have all these different fighters who are ranked who haven't fought in either over a year or multiple years since their last fight. And you have all these random people who we've never heard of, Blood and Sweat. They're like, oh yeah, we got to rank these guys. How are you a ranked fighter and you're not fighting? Makes absolutely no sense. There should be, first off, before I get into the rest of the video, there should be some concrete rules in place where if you're inactive for a certain period of time, you should be pulled from the rankings. Dana White alluded to that the other day, but it's just not true, and no media member called him out. Now, fair enough, I think this was at Power Slap, but a lot of the people who cover Power Slap are just MMA media members who want to stay in Dana White's good graces. So they could have asked him, oh, you alluded to there's a time period where people are pulled out of the rankings. Well, what about all these examples where it's not true? So either someone's not doing their homework or that's just a lie, or you only use it to manipulate the rankings. The UFC, manipulates the rankings 100%. If you turn down a fight, they'll pull you from the rankings. They did it to Leon Edwards back in 2020. He was turning down Khamzat Chimaev. They've done it in other examples, but there's no doubt with these faceless names that they have, 9-3.3, Honolulu, blood and sweat, they're definitely manipulating the rankings. And I understand, okay, the rankings don't mean everything. You know, it's not like they're necessarily even determining title shots off the rankings. But this just goes to show you how illegitimate the rankings actually are. And it's actually a problem in MMA because you have all these guys who they're like, oh, well, he's ranked number 3, deserves a title shot, but, oh, he hasn't fought in 2 years. Makes absolutely no sense. Now, let's get into UFC 295. I made a couple videos about this already. I will link them down in the description. But what happened is we were supposed to get Jon Jones defending his heavyweight title against Stipe Miocic. Jon Jones got injured. He pulled out of the fight. Stipe Miocic apparently wasn't even offered an interim title fight. And they booked Sergey Pavlovich, who was supposedly the backup, to fight Tom Aspinall on 2 weeks' notice for an interim heavyweight title. Now, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more when I get to the pound-for-pound debate. But you have Stipe Miocic getting a title shot after sitting out since 2021 where he got folded like a lawn chair. But forget about Stipe for a second. You have Jon Jones, who's supposedly unwilling to fight anyone but Stipe Miocic. He says, I'm only fighting Stipe. Dana White says Jones wants Stipe. And even when he returns from his injury, which supposedly won't be for at least 8 months, I would say best case scenario 6 months from now, you're looking at summer of 2024. So you're looking at Jon Jones being out from March of 2023 to summer of 2024. You're talking about a year and a half, roughly, of inactivity from Jon Jones. Not only should he be pulled from the rankings, but he should also be stripped of his belt. Because how is he going to hold on to his belt? You have guys like Yuri Prochazka, Jamal Hill. They have to vacate their belts. And I know someone's going to be down in the comments, oh, well, they openly vacated it because that's what they wanted to do. That's not the truth. The UFC told them, we want you to vacate. We're going to do a vacant title fight. We need a main event for UFC 282, something along those lines. I don't understand how Jones is going to stay the heavyweight champ. They're going to crown an interim champ, and then Jon Jones isn't even going to fight that interim champ. How does that make any sense? It makes absolutely no sense at all that he's going to sit out because he's injured. Okay, fair enough. But he already sat out 8 months before he got injured. So talk about a debacle from the UFC. Remember when Jon Jones beat Ciryl Gane back in March at UFC 285? It was a foregone conclusion. It's him versus Stipe this summer. Who remembers that? International Fight Week. That's when it's going to happen. Jones sat out for 8 months after a 2-minute fight where he took absolutely no damage. Stipe already been sitting out for like 75 years before then. And instead they say, oh, we're going to book him in November. We're going to let him sit out for 8 months. And that's the problem when you delay the fight for so long. Now he gets injured 2 weeks before the fight. He's out for another 8 months. So he's going to be out for over a year and a half, or basically a year and a half. Depends when he actually comes back. Maybe he returns quicker, and maybe it's just a little over a year. But if you're out for that long, there should also be concrete rules. Look, if you're going to be out for this long, you need to be stripped of the title. He's going to be out for 8 months. Even 8 months from now, that's still, okay, maybe being stripped, but if you're going to book an interim title fight, at least say, okay, when Jones returns, he'll fight the interim champ. But nope, that's not what they're going to do. They're going to book Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, which is a whole nother topic that I've already broke down, and I'll link that video down in the description. Now, you still have Jon Jones sitting at number 1 pound for pound. And for those of you who don't know what pound for pound means, and it's obviously super subjective, it basically means if you were sized up exactly how you are, sized up or sized down to a different weight class, would your skills translate? So if you took a Alexander Volkanovski and you made a heavyweight version of Alexander Volkanovski, how would he do against a guy like Jon Jones? If you took a heavyweight Jon Jones and shrunk him down to welterweight, how would Jon Jones' skill set do at welterweight? That's what pound for pound means, okay? In case anybody watching this video didn't know. Now, how do I personally grade pound for pound? Now, I came up with 3 things. There's a bunch of things that you could look at, but I think the 3 most important things when it comes to crowning a pound for pound fighter is activity, level of opposition, and the performances they put on. So based on that, how is Jon Jones sitting number 1 pound for pound? You look at Jon Jones. He's fought once since 2020 against Ciryl Gane. Okay, fair enough. Ciryl Gane's a decent win. I don't think it's the most amazing win I've ever seen, but it's a really good win. Ciryl Gane's a very good heavyweight. But let's also take into account that heavyweight is literally the worst men's division in the UFC. Heavyweight division is the least skilled division in all of the UFC in terms of the men's divisions, okay? Then you look back at his previous fights before that, you're getting all the way back till February of 2020. And also, the Ciryl Gane performance was amazing. He submitted him in a little over 2 minutes. But you get back to February of 2020, he wins against Dominic Reyes, who turned out to be a dead body afterwards. Maybe Jones did that, maybe he didn't. A lot of people thought Reyes won that fight. Now, I'm not one of these people that say, oh, Jon Jones definitely lost the fight. I understand people thinking Reyes won that fight, okay? I think more people, I would say 85 to 90% of people would say Dominic Reyes won that fight. And Dominic Reyes doesn't have a good win in his entire career, okay? And he technically lost that fight. That's what Dominic Reyes' entire career was based on. Then you go to the fight before that, Thiago Santos. He's not even in the UFC anymore. This is all the way back in 2019. We're talking 4 years ago, July of 2019. That is craziness. Then Anthony Smith, all the way back in 2019 as well, March of 2019. Then the fight before that, Alexander Gustafsson, back in 2018. So this is what we're gauging pound for pound for Jon Jones. He's pound for pound in 2023 because he beat Dominic Reyes by razor hair split decision. Was it a split decision? It wasn't even a split decision, but unanimous decision. But he beats him by a razor close decision in 2020, February of 2020. We're making him pound for pound for wins off Dominic Reyes, Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, and Alexander Gustafsson. And we literally have to get into a time machine to rank him pound for pound in 2023 because we're going back 4 or 5 years to old wins. This is crazy to me. But if you look at Jon Jones' resume, okay, and I think Jon Jones is one of the best fighters of all time. I picked him to beat Ciryl Gane, okay? If you look at his resume, he has not had a good win. And this is going to be crazy. This is going to be crazy. But essentially since April of 2016, it was technically, or not April of 2016, July of 2016. And that was technically a no contest because he tested positive for PEDs. That was that head kick TKO over Daniel Cormier. Because say what you will, okay, I'm not saying the other wins aren't decent, but I'm saying like one of those staple wins against a really good fighter. Gustafsson at 232 was a shell of his former self, okay? Anthony Smith got it because Jones had cleaned out the division. Santos, okay, he was a threat, but he got it because he cleaned out the division, basically. Dominic Reyes, same thing. If it wasn't for the division being cleaned out, Reyes would have never got the shot. And then right after that, Reyes got destroyed by Jan Blachowicz. So we're literally going back in time, looking at wins from 3 to 4 years ago, to rank him pound for pound number 1 in 2023 going into 2024. I mean, think about this. Jon Jones, I love watching Jon Jones fight. I think he's one of the best fighters of all time. But essentially Jon Jones is Uncle Rico. You know, he's living in the past. Coach would have put me in fourth quarter, we would have took states. How much you want to bet I could throw a pigskin over the mountains? We've seen 2 minutes of Jon Jones's fights in the last 3-4 years. 2 minutes against Ciryl Gane, who has no grappling at all. Absolutely no grappling. Got out grappled by Francis Ngannou with no ACL. So I just think it is disturbing right now to rank Jon Jones number 1 pound for pound, especially when you have Islam Makhachev. And I know I've talked about Islam Makhachev's performance at UFC 294. It was incredible. But let's go over his last 3 wins, okay? Which have all come in the last 12 months. In his last fight, he head kick KOs Alexander Volkanovski in the first round. Alexander Volkanovski, one of the greatest fighters in the UFC currently in his prime, ranked number 2 pound for pound. The fight before that, UFC 284, beats Alexander Volkanovski via decision. People say it was controversial. It was a clear-cut win for Islam Makhachev. I'm not going to go through that again. I've talked about that, ad nauseum, okay? Beat Volkanovski clear, easy win. Not an easy win, but beat him pretty clear. Easy decision, in my opinion. And only lost 1 round or maybe arguably 2 rounds. But again, I'm not going to get into that. Volkanovski was ranked pound for pound number 1 at that point in time. I don't understand how Islam Makhachev didn't take the number 1 pound for pound spot right then and there. It made absolutely no sense because essentially when you have weight classes that are only 10 pounds apart, you can find out because Volkanovski went up to 155. He fought Islam Makhachev. He lost. Therefore, he loses his pound for pound spot. Then the fight before that, UFC 280, October of last year, beats Charles Oliveira, at the time ranked number 3 pound for pound. And went out there and dominated him too. Look at all 3 of those performances. Say what you will about the first Volkanovski fight. I thought it was a great performance, okay? And again, this is my opinion. This is my channel. You guys will have to let me know if you agree down in the comments. But to beat Volkanovski twice, who's currently one of the GOATs of the sport, to beat him twice, 1 by head kick KO, beat Charles Oliveira I mean, dominated him, submitted him, dominated him. Won against the number 3 pound-for-pound guy, the number 1 pound-for-pound guy, and then the number 2 pound-for-pound guy. How is he not ranked number 1? Meanwhile, you got Jon Jones' Uncle Rico. We're ranking him number 1 off of wins in 2020? We're ranking him number... So essentially, the only win I feel like you can take into account in 2023 pound-for-pound rankings for Jon Jones is essentially the Cyril Gane fight. So you're telling me Cyril Gane's not even ranked in the pound-for-pound at that time? I don't believe. If he was at the bottom of it. So we're ranking him number 1 because of that win. Or are we going back? We're literally going back way in time to rank him. I don't understand it. The lack of activity. And then on top of that, and this is where I was getting at earlier, we'll talk about this later. The fact that Jon Jones is willing to fight nobody but Grandpa Stipe Miocic, old man Stipe Miocic, in his 40s, who's had now, by the time they fight, it's going to be a 3.5-year layoff. The fact that Jon Jones says, no, I'm not fighting any up-and-coming killer. Sergey Pavlovich, no, couldn't be me. I'm not fighting Sergey Pavlovich. Tom Aspinall, no way. I'm not fighting these young bucks. The fact that you're not willing to fight certain opposition, I mean, if that isn't the least pound-for-pound thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and I know that almost doesn't make sense, but he's literally turning down fights, essentially. And the UFC's pandering to him because he sells pay-per-views. He's not a Conor McGregor star, but Jon Jones against the right opponent is a draw. 150%. And the UFC's pandering to him to give him a fight against Stipe Miocic, who's had such a long layoff. There's fans of the sport that haven't even seen him. There's people that were in 8th grade the last time that Stipe Miocic fought, and now they are graduating high school this year. Is that not insanity? So they're pandering to Jones as he ducks actual opposition. I don't think he's scared of him, but I think he thinks, oh, I'll get a quick paycheck against Stipe. It'll sell more, and then I'm out of here. That doesn't belong in pound-for-pound number 1. What belongs pound-for-pound number 1 is a guy like Islam Makhachev, who's been dominating opposition. Okay, they weren't the greatest level of competition. When you look back at Bobby Green and Dan Hooker, they're not horrible opponents, but again, not the greatest fighters ever. But then going on the long streak he's on, culminating with the last 3 fights two against Volkanovski with great performances and 1 against Charles Oliveira, how can you not give this guy pound-for-pound number 1? Meanwhile, Jon Jones won't fight till summer of 2024. So you're looking at from February of 2020 to July of 2024 or summer of 2024, Jon Jones will have been in the cage for a little over 2 minutes. And we're ranking him pound-for-pound number 1. It makes absolutely no sense. And he's not willing to fight good opposition. And that's a bit of an exaggeration when I say good opposition. Stipe Miocic may very well still be amazing, but we don't know because he doesn't fight. It makes no sense. The pound-for-pound rankings are horrible. Islam Makhachev should be number 1 over Jon Jones. Rank Jon Jones number 2, where honestly, I would rank him number 3, but honestly, take him out of the pound-for-pound. If you're not willing to fight up-and-coming contenders who deserve it, then you shouldn't be in the pound-for-pound. You're basically ducking fights. It's an embarrassment. Islam should be number 1. Jon Jones should be like 2 or 3 or out of the rankings completely. But also, considering the amount of time he's going to be out from fight to fight, he should have been stripped of his belt. Look what happened to Yuri. Look what happened to Jamal. It's just disturbing. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Where should Jones be on the pound-for-pound list? Where should Islam Makhachev be on the pound-for-pound list? Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.